All right, so I'm gonna I have a lot of slides, and I'm gonna try to go through them quickly so I can give you guys as much value as possible. I'll skip through my background. You've heard too much about it this week. And if you haven't, then just come talk to me. So let's just start off with a quick poll. How many of you have had a director of marketing approach you, or VP of marketing approach you for 2020 planning and say, I need more budget? And how many of you have had that person give you a good business case to hire that person? One person. Okay, so this is a very common problem, right? Directors of marketing say they need more budget, and they're not often able to get it. Okay, so this is a study done by Gartner. It talks about CMO budgets, and it was escalating up until 2016. The last couple of years, it's just been stagnant. And one of the things that they found in the report is CMOs connecting their work to business results was a huge problem, and that's why budgets have stayed stagnant. And then this is a report done by Salesforce, which says this year, 57% of sales reps will miss their quota. And I'm sure there's a common problem in the room where you have some sales reps meeting quota, some exceeding, but most of them are not meeting quota. And that has a big impact on your board meetings, on your projections, how much budget you get, whether or not you can go acquire more companies. They're all connected together. And here's a great stat about that as well, which is VPs of sales, their tenure has come down from about 26 months down to 19 months. That's less than 2 years that an average VP of sales is staying with an organization. And so what's the problem, right? In my belief, there's multiple components of this, but one of my views is that the models that are built out when we're forecasting for planning are broken. So you have the CFO that's forecasting. Oftentimes it's kind of like a financial or math exercise. And oftentimes it's tied to bookings where there's connection with the VP of sales. But there's not enough conversation about how many MQLs do we need to close the bookings. So I've told this story to some people here this week is, let's say you have to close 100 deals in Q1 of next year. How many MQLs do you need? Is your MQL to close rate 4 to 1? Is it 6 to 1? And then what's your average days to close? Is it 120 days? If it's 120 days to close those deals in January to March, you need to have those MQLs today, right? And that math is not being done in the forecasting. And the second aspect of that is, once you know how many MQLs you need, what is the budget you need to drive those MQLs, right? So if your cost per MQL is $100 a lead or $1,000 a lead, if you're in the enterprise B2B space, do you have enough budget allocated to drive those MQLs to close the amount of deals that you need to close, right? And that math is not being done. And because of this, most marketing teams are actually underfunded. And so why does this happen? It's because a lot of software companies start off as sales organizations. So because the founder is the first salesperson, and over time they duplicate themselves, right? So they'll hire an SDR to replace that role, then they'll hire an AE, eventually remove themselves from the sales process. And over time you can actually grow to even $100 million in sales without having a fully functional marketing team that contributes to revenue. And marketing ends up becoming traditional in that time, right? So PR and events, trade shows, comms, product marketing, sales enablement, this is probably what most of what your marketing team does. And then there's some element of demand gen there, but the idea is that marketing is not the primary revenue driver. And CEOs are aware of this. So Gartner did another study, they polled tech CEOs everywhere, and they found that marketing and demand generation is one of the most important problems that CEOs are trying to solve, but it's also one of the problems that they have the least amount of confidence in their ability to solve it, right? So there's a huge issue there in terms of what the organization needs and whether or not they can actually solve it. And PE investors agree with this. So this is a study done by BDO. They surveyed a bunch of PE firms in North America and across the world. And the major strategy that PE firms are deploying when they acquire a company is to buy add-on companies so they can cross-sell and upsell to the existing base. And the second is digital transformation. We had Ronan talk about it yesterday on the tech side, but digital transformation also means how you go to market. And that's an area where PE investors are putting more dollars. And the way they're doing this is they're adding more expertise to management and leadership teams of the organizations. They're adding them to the board. They're using a shared services model and a bunch of other ways, like if they acquire a company that has digital maturity, they can bring that to the platform company as well. And then when polled, when those PE investors were asked, how important is the digital potential of this organization to your investment decision, 57% said it was very important. There's a lot of founders in the room, and Zane talked about, what it takes to get acquired, digital potential is one of those items. And so I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. And this is like super basic stuff that almost everybody in this room should be doing if you're running a SaaS company or if you have a bunch of portfolio companies. This is advertising for late funnel keywords. So I'm giving some examples. This is fundraising and donation software. You can probably spend between 10 to 20,000 just based on that keyword volume to generate leads that are ready to buy or talk to a salesperson today. And if you're not doing that, you're missing an opportunity. This is in the field service management space. If you're like, there's companies like Service Pro, ServiceNow, there's a few companies in that space. Same thing, but you can spend a lot more here. You can spend up to $40,000 to $50,000. If you look on the left, the amount of volume there is like 3,000 plus clicks that you can get if you just advertise for those keywords. Another one, community management software. I think JMI is in the room and they invest in Higher Logic. They're doing this, so they're the market leader in their space. But if you're not advertising for community management software, you're missing out on a bunch of opportunity as well. So why is this a challenge? This is another study that says that in the leadership or the executive teams of organizations, there just isn't enough digital literacy. So even if you think about marketing, like digital marketing has really only become big in the last 20 years. And in the last 10 years is when things that worked are beginning to become duplicated across different organizations. So only now can you find a CMO with 10 years of experience that has done digital, right? And most CMOs don't have the right skills. So if you look at the far right metric there, only 8% of companies feel that they're strong in all areas of digital marketing. And a lot of people report a shortage of digital skills. 1 out of 5 feel like they have digital under control. And that's because digital marketing talent is hard to find. And what's surprising about this chart is you'll see digital marketing talent is harder to find than a cybersecurity expert, a network architecture expert, a 3D printing expert, which is crazy when you think about it. The 3D printing market is so, and the reason is there's a supply and demand issue, right? Every company in this room needs digital marketing talent. Not every company in this room needs 3D printing talent. And here, there's a couple of other stats that I want to just point out, which is 79% of B2B buyers say that they are consuming 3 to 5 pieces of content before ever talking to a salesperson. And that number is growing. Every year, people are talking to sales later in the funnel, right? So if you don't have that top end of the funnel being addressed by some kind of content, you're missing out on huge opportunities. Here's another one. Across different stages of the buyer journey, so problem identification, solution exploration, requirements building, et cetera, Gartner did a survey, and the pink chart bars represent how the buyer got the information from a sales rep, and the purple bars represent they got the information from a website. So some people there's overlap, but there's up to 80% of people in each of those instances that are getting that information from a website. So if your website is not the one giving them that information, that lead is going to someone else. And so what this means is sales and marketing need to work together. So if you look on the left, this is like the traditional model, right? Marketing builds the MQL, hands it off to sales, sales nurtures it to close. And on the right is a more collaborative effort throughout all stages of the buyer journey, including at the close stages, right? You need more content to close people beyond just sending them a one-page deck or a case study. And so the big question is, I'm speeding through this because the shot clock is running. How we get there is marketing needs more budget. And the issue is we need to make the right business case, right? So in order to do that, marketing needs more data-driven insights, and they need to connect their activities to revenue, closed won, and LTV. That chart on the right says only 11% of CMOs, 11% of CMOs cite brand awareness as one of their KPIs, and 7% say ROI is one of them, right? So if you think about that, which is just absolutely insane, right? With their core revenue driving function, and they don't cite cost of acquisition is like 3%, which is crazy as well. So that's the top level data to set it up. I'm just going to quickly go through the 7 steps, and I'll also give you a tactical playbook to start with this today. So this is a list of the most requested diligence items. Bunch of PE firms in the room. Have you ever had a company that has all of these? Or how often do you have a company that fulfills all the diligence request items? Not that often, right? So it's requested, and if you're a founder and you're looking to exit, to have, churn by customer type, what your pipeline looks like, what your MQL to close rates are, all these items are critical if you want to close the deal, and a lot of founders don't have that. And so marketing needs to do its part, right? So step 1 is to build out your MQL to closed won report, What is your marketing captured lead to MQL rate? What's your MQL to sales accepted lead rate, sales accepted to SQL, SQL to closed? And a lot of companies, when I talk to them in my initial consultation call, they can't give me those numbers. So we actually have to go build out the data models. Here's a very basic example of that model can look like after you do a bunch of mining and compare databases together, is you have cohort analysis of the months, how many MQLs came, how many opportunities came, what the conversion rates were all the way through to close. And the other part of that is connecting it through to cost. So what's your cost of MQL? What's your cost per SQL, cost of closed one? Step 2 is to build your channel and campaign reporting. So for every channel, trade shows, digital, SEO, et cetera, you want to know those same metrics by channel. And actually, if you can drill down on each of these. So if like trade shows, for example, if we go to 100 of them, I should be able to track to a specific trade show and say, I put $50,000 into this, I sent people to fly, I paid for their hotel, I paid for the booth, I paid for all the tchotchkes and all the stuff that we invested in. Did we actually get leads? If we didn't, we're not going to that trade show next year, right? Whereas other people say, well, in our market, you have to have one-to-one relationships, you have to show up, build a connection, and then maybe in a year they'll buy, which is probably true, but then at some point it needs to show up in this spreadsheet, right? So you can't really get away with that every single time. So building that for every channel and every campaign that you're running. And then making a decision. So if a channel is severely above acceptable levels of cost of acquisition or cost per MQL, stop it. If it's in a place where it's slightly above, you have to test and optimize. And if it's below, you got to open the floodgates, right? Which is where, if you have the data, you can make that decision. And like a lot of directors of marketing think PE doesn't necessarily want to invest into marketing, but that's not the case. If you make the business case, you can get significantly more funding for those initiatives. And then step 3 is once you have your MQLs and you have the close rate data, you got to figure out how long did it take to close those deals. So that math that I was talking about in the beginning, if it takes 120 days, you need 6 MQLs in month 1 to close those deals in month 5, right? So your forecasting needs to map to that. Step 4, and this is a simplistic model, but identify opportunities to scale for every channel. So how much more can you spend on paid media? Like I have a potential client or a client that I'm working with that's spending less than $3,000 on paid media, but they can actually be spending up to 15, right? So showing all the way through how many more deals can we close if we spend $15,000 a month, and what's the annual impact of that? Same thing for SEO, same thing for trade shows, same thing for every channel that marketing is investing into. Number 5 is identify your gaps in content. So across the buyer journey, you're having different pieces of content to engage with the customers. A lot of people don't have these stages filled out. You will have decks for sales, you'll have one-pagers, you'll have case studies. You may not have thought leadership pieces, you may not have nurture sequences, you may not even have landing pages for the paid media campaigns that you want to run. So you're missing a lot of information or content that prospect can consume before they close. So taking an inventory of everything and then identifying those gaps and then figuring out what you need to build out next. And that includes post-close, right? Like post-close, like are you retaining them in 90 days if you're in a recurring SaaS model, or a year out when their contract expires, or advocacy-wise, like is their NPS high? Are you producing enough content to support the product to drive NPS? All right, so step 6. So identify the team members needed. So you've identified all these opportunities, but you need manpower to execute, right? So if you have a certain marketing team of, let's say, 5 people, what are the positions you need to fill to execute on the activities you need to execute on to drive the MQLs you need to close the deals you want, right? So in this case, we identified 4 roles to support all the marketing functions. And those things cost money. So how much would it cost on average in a specific market? In San Francisco, it'll be more expensive than it will be in Birmingham, than it'll be in Seattle, et cetera. So we gotta forecast that. And then step 7 is identify the MQLs that you'll need and the budget needed to support. Like, hey, we forecasted this many close won deals. For that, we need this many SQLs. For that, we need this many MQLs. And at a cost per MQL of, let's say, $150, we need a budget of $1 million in 2019, 1.1 in 2020, and 1.3 in 2021, right? And so when you're going through an acquisition, you have to forecast 2-3 years out to show what the potential is to scale. And the end goal is to be scientific about marketing. It's not about feel and gut instinct. It's everything that you can do in marketing in today's day and age with all the tools that are out there. You should be able to track everything. There is a way, and it might require some operational adjustments or infrastructure, but once you build it, then that engine can start running, and you can make a better business case. So bonus quick start guide for you guys. This is just a set of quick plays that I think everybody should look into today. You can even, your director of marketing can do it. You don't need a consultant. You can just do it yourself. Advertise for all the late funnel keywords for your market. Ideally, my guess is if you're especially verticalized software, your competitors are not maxed out. There's no way, because most people are focused on sales, right? So if you can spend $10,000, $20,000 a month on that, start testing today with $2,000, $3,000, and then figure out a way to scale it. Number two, create content for those same keywords. So on the first page of Google, you want to be advertising, so you have one piece of real estate, and then if you're organically ranking, you have a second piece of real estate. Third, make sure your website is optimized so that when someone comes from the dollars that you're spending, things are actually converting. Fourth, make sure that you have ways to capture email. Actually, ClickFunnels does a great job of this. They have like all kinds of educational programs that you can sign up for, and then they'll nurture you through all the way through to the product. So figure out what that is for your market, whether it's a consumer guide, whether it's a thought leadership piece, whether it's a webinar, white paper, whatever it is. And then create and nurture content based on those gaps that we've identified, right? And nurture them through email. You can nurture them on Facebook through Facebook ads that are retargeting people that are already in your funnel. You can do the same on LinkedIn and Instagram. So use multi-channel, nurturing to get them through, and use video, especially on those social channels, because that's what will bump up your engagement and add relevancy scores. And then for the early funnel stages, you gotta be the thought leader in your market. So if you look at verticalized software, any kind of software that you're in, features are commoditized, right? Content can be a brand driver. If you are the thought leader in your space, you will get the lion's share of the market share. It's because the people aren't buying from you because of the software, they're buying from you because of the story and the transformation that you're promising them, right? So if you can build the right narrative for your organization, they'll look at you differently, right? So people look at Salesforce differently than the hundreds of other CRMs out there. And those other CRMs are successful, but Salesforce is the mammoth in the room, right? So the other thing to think about is to work backwards. So this is a quick way to think about this is if you look at buyer journey stages as awareness, knowledge, and consideration, work back from people that are in that hot consideration stage all the way to the cold awareness stage. So cold awareness stage is when people start content marketing, they'll just start randomly blogging. We were at this trade show today, we did this, we did that, right? So about me. Whereas like this approach is you're starting with someone searching for us, what is the piece of content we need to create to get them into the funnel, and then work your way backwards. If you start on the bottom left, you're gonna burn a lot of marketing dollars. Whereas if you start on the right, you can start building those business cases. And here's some examples, like people might be ready for a free trial. They may be wanted to download a consumer guide if they're considering the software. They may visit your pricing page, right? They may wanna see a case study. They may wanna see a thought leadership webinar. So build out all those assets in order, and you'll slowly have that marketing engine. And actually, you can go beyond this. Like people have free trial to conversion rate issues, MQL to close rate issues, right? Retention issues. So you want to build content. Like Todd mentioned yesterday, they were working on creating content for people that were churning quickly, even though they got excited and started their business. So you need to do that as well. And then work backwards, right? So you have high ROI items like let's say online store software. Shopify should be advertising on Google and ranking for that keyword, but to rank for online store software is one of the most competitive keywords that you can rank for, right? Because there's all kinds of tools out there. So prioritize and work backwards and ignore everything below the line for the most part. If you have some quick wins, you can definitely do that. And in terms of building the right team, start with one full stack marketer that can take you a long way, and then work through those high ROI items. And then slowly, as you scale, as you find success, you can make those business cases to hire one more and two more and build specialization, and then leverage some freelancers along the way if that helps. And that's it. 29 seconds left.
You did great job.